Hello there, welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Galaxy, where humans face the unknown, outsmart the impossible, and turn every test into victory. So sit back and let the story begin.
Rail had read the file 3 times before he ever met her. The classified document sat in his personal terminal like a warning label on something poisonous. It described humans in language that made his stomach turn. Persistence predators. Binocular forward-facing eyes designed to lock onto fleeing prey. Skeletal structure capable of absorbing repeated impact. Cardiovascular system built for long-distance chasing. A homeworld so violent that 99% of every species that ever lived on it had gone extinct. Class, 9 Death World. The highest rating the Union had ever given that he expected a monster. What walked into the xenobiology lab on the first morning was a woman with brown skin, dark hair pulled into a messy knot, and a smile so warm it made his bioluminescent patches glow involuntarily. "You must be Rail," she said. "I am Danny. I brought you something." She held out a small container of Sylvan nutrient paste, his favorite kind, the kind that was hard to find outside his home system. "How did you know?" he asked. "I asked around," she said, still smiling. "Figured if we're going to be lab partners, I should know what you like." That was the first day. Over the weeks that followed, Rail watched Danny move through the ship like sunlight through water. She was soft-spoken. She laughed easily. She apologized to a supply crate she tripped over in the cargo bay. She learned the names of every single crew member on the Pale Corridor, all 46 of them, within her first week. The crew did not know what to make of her. The Draith security officers watched her with narrowed eyes. The Pelori engineers kept their distance. Even the Vichy communications team, who were friendly with everyone, seemed unsure. Rail understood why. Every species aboard had read the same files. They knew what lived behind that smile. Commander Asin called Rail into his office on the 9th day. The Draith officer sat behind his metal desk, his armored hide catching the overhead light. He did not waste time with small talk. "You are spending considerable time with a human," Asin said. "She is my lab partner, Commander. She is a class 9 predator on a ship full of prey species. Do not forget that." Rail wanted to argue, but he held his tongue. He returned to the lab and found Danny sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting biological samples from their last planetary survey. She was humming a tune he did not recognize, something slow and sweet. "Everything all right?" she asked without looking up. "Fine," he said. "Danny, can I ask you something?" "Always. Why do you smile so much?" She paused her sorting. She looked up at him with those brown eyes, those forward-facing predator eyes that the file said were designed to track movement across open ground. But all Rail saw in them was kindness. "Because everything is worth being happy about at least once," she said. "This ship, these samples, that terrible nutrient paste you love. It is all borrowed time, Rail. Every bit of it. Might as well enjoy the lending." He did not fully understand what she meant, but he felt something loosen in his chest when she said it. Days passed. They fell into a rhythm. Danny collected. Rail cataloged. She told him about Earth, about oceans so deep that no light reached the bottom, about mountains so tall the air became too thin to breathe, about forests that burned themselves down just to grow back stronger. She described it all with love, not pride, like she was talking about a difficult parent she had forgiven. Rail began to forget the file. He began to see only Danny. Then the orders came. The Pale Corridor was rerouted to a frontier system. A planet called Ardenmere had been flagged for colony settlement, and their ship was closest. Standard survey work. Catalog the biosphere, confirm habitability, file the report. Easy duty. Danny pulled up the planetary data on her terminal. Rail watched her eyes move across the readings. Atmosphere, temperature, water content, soil composition. She smiled at most of it. Good air, clean water, gentle climate. Then she reached the soil data. Her smile disappeared. Not slowly, not gradually. It just stopped, like someone had switched off a light inside her. "Danny," Rail said. She did not answer right away. Her fingers moved across the display, pulling up deeper readings, cross-referencing mineral deposits, checking subsurface density patterns. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing changed. It was subtle, but Rail noticed. The rhythm of her chest shifted from relaxed to something controlled, something deliberate. Something is wrong with the soil readings, she whispered. Wrong how? She looked at him. For the first time since he had known her, Rail saw something behind the gentleness. Something old. Something that had kept her species alive on a world that tried to kill them every single day for 4 billion years. I do not know yet, she said quietly, but I intend to find out. She turned back to the screen. Her smile did not return. Rail stood beside her in the dim light of the lab, watching the planet Ardenmere rotate slowly on the display. Green and blue and beautiful. A perfect world. He wondered why that made Danny afraid. The first thing Rail noticed about Ardenmere from orbit was how perfect it looked. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting in lazy patterns across a calm atmosphere. It was the kind of world that species fought wars over. The kind of world that made colony planners weep with joy. The second thing he noticed was that Danny had not slept. She was already in the shuttle bay when Rail arrived for the landing mission. Her survey pack strapped tight across her back, her boots laced in that careful way humans did when they expected to run. Her eyes were ringed with shadow, but her hands were steady. Did you rest at all? Rail asked. Enough, she said, which meant no. The landing team was small. Danny, Rail, 2 Draith security officers named Goss and Pelham, and a Pelorisoil engineer called Miven. Commander Austin stayed aboard the Pale Corridor to coordinate from orbit. The shuttle punched through the atmosphere in a clean descent, and when the doors opened, Rail understood why this planet had been chosen. The air smelled sweet. A warm breeze carried the scent of something like fresh rain and green leaves. The grass was soft beneath his feet. In every direction, rolling hills stretched toward a distant tree line, gentle and inviting. Goss, the senior security officer, actually lowered his weapon and let out a long breath. Beautiful, Miven said quietly. Danny said nothing. She walked a few steps away from the group, knelt in the grass, and pressed her palm flat against the ground. She closed her eyes. She stayed like that for a long time. What is she doing? Goss asked, his voice low. Listening, Rail said, though he was not entirely sure himself. When Danny opened her eyes, her face had not changed. That same focused, unsmiling expression she had worn since reading the soil data. She stood and looked at the tree line, then at the sky, then at the grass beneath her feet. No insects, she said. Rail blinked. He listened. She was right. No buzzing, no clicking, no small things moving through the grass. The breeze carried nothing but silence. Maybe they're seasonal, Miven offered. No birds either, Danny said. No movement in the canopy. No calls. Nothing. The planetary survey registered a full biosphere, Goss said, frowning. It registered plant life, Danny corrected. Plants do not run. Plants do not flee. She looked at the ground again. Something scared everything else away. Goss shifted uncomfortably. Pelham placed a hand on his sidearm. Miven looked at Rail as if hoping for reassurance. Rail had none to give. Commander Austin's voice crackled through the comms. Proceed with the survey. Collect samples. Report back by sunset. The team spread out. Goss and Pelham secured a perimeter. Miven began testing water from a nearby stream. Rail set up his field scanner near the shuttle, and Danny walked to the edge of the clearing with a hand drill and a stack of sample tubes. She drilled deep, deeper than a standard survey required. She pulled core samples from 1 meter, then 2, then 5. She labeled each one with careful handwriting. She did not speak. She did not smile. She worked with a kind of grim patience that reminded Rail of the hunters described in her species file. The ones who chased prey for days across open ground without stopping. Not fast, just relentless. By midday, she had collected over 30 deep soil samples. The others had finished their tasks and were resting near the shuttle, enjoying the warm air and soft ground. Goss was almost relaxed. Miven was sketching the landscape on a data pad. Danny kept drilling. When night fell, the team set up a field lab inside the shuttle. Goss and Pelham took watch shifts outside. Miven slept. Rail tried to sleep, but could not. He kept hearing the soft clink of glass tubes and the hum of the analysis machine from the back of the shuttle. He found Danny at dawn. She was sitting on the floor surrounded by data readouts, her fingers stained with soil, her eyes red and glassy. She was trembling, not from fear, from exhaustion. "Danny," he said gently, "what did you find?" She looked up at him. The expression on her face was one he had never seen before. It was grief. "Come here," she said. "Look." She pulled up a subsurface scan on her portable display. It showed a cross-section of the ground beneath them, layered in color. The top layers were normal. Soil, rock, mineral deposits. But below that, starting at roughly 200 meters deep and extending downward as far as the scanner could reach, the image turned into something else. A web. A network of organic tunnels, thick and branching, spreading across the entire northern continent like veins beneath skin. "What is that?" Rail asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Something alive," Danny said. "Something enormous. It is growing through the crust of this planet, feeding on the minerals, the heat, the water table. That is why there are no animals. That is why the soil readings felt wrong. This planet is not resting, Rail." She placed her hand flat on the shuttle floor. "It is being eaten alive." Rail stared at the display. The tunnels pulsed faintly in the scan, rhythmic and slow, like a heartbeat buried beneath the world. Outside, the sun rose over Ardenmere. The grass swayed in the breeze. The sky turned gold and pink. It was the most beautiful morning Rail had ever seen, and beneath it all, something vast and hungry was growing. Nobody moved for a long time after Danny finished speaking. She had laid it all out on the table inside the shuttle. The soil samples, the subsurface scans, the biological analysis of the tunnel material. Every crew member on the landing team stood in silence, staring at the display that showed the organic network spreading beneath the entire northern continent of Ardenmere. Commander Asen's voice came through the comms from orbit, flat and controlled. "Say that again. The hollow. Commander," Danny repeated. "The biological signature matches Union record from the Tessara collapse and the Brenner extinction. This planet is a hollow incubation site. The organism has been growing beneath the surface for what I estimate to be 3 to 5 years. It has already consumed most of the subsurface ecosystem. The animals are gone. The root systems of the forests are next. Once those fail, the surface collapses." Silence on the channel. Then Asen spoke again, and this time his voice carried something Rail had never heard from a Draith commander. "Fear. Evacuate the surface. Now." Goss moved first. He started barking orders at Pelham. Mivan scrambled to pack the equipment. Rail grabbed his field scanner and began folding the sample racks. Everyone moved fast, hands shaking, voices tight. Everyone except Danny. She stood at the edge of the shuttle ramp, looking out at the green hills and the soft sky. The wind moved through her hair. The ground beneath her feet gave a faint tremor, barely noticeable, like a sleeping animal shifting in its rest. "Danny," Rail said, "we need to go." "I know," she said, but she did not move yet. She was thinking. Rail could see it in the way her eyes tracked across the landscape, measuring, calculating, reading the terrain the way a predator reads a hunting ground. They lifted off within 20 minutes and docked with the pale corridor in hard silence. Asen called an emergency briefing in the command hall. Every department had attended. Danny stood at the front of the room, still in her dirt-stained field suit, and explained what the hollow was: a single organism, a planet killer. It burrowed into a world's crust during its dormant seeding phase, then grew a tunnel network that fed on minerals, geothermal energy, and underground water. Once it reached maturity, it erupted from the surface, consumed the remaining biosphere, and launched reproductive spores into space to find new worlds. 11 planets had been lost to it in the past century. No species had ever stopped it once it reached incubation stage. How long until it matures? Asen asked. "Weeks," Danny said. "Maybe less. The growth rate is accelerating. The nearest Union fleet is 6 weeks away." Asen said. The room went cold. Rail could feel it. Every officer, every crew member, doing the same calculation in their heads. 6 weeks for help. Weeks until the hollow erupted. The numbers did not work. Then we leave, said Goss. We file the report. We warn the fleet. And we leave Ardenmere. And the colony's settlers. Danny asked, what settlers? The ones already in transit, Danny said quietly. 3 transport ships carrying 12,000 civilians are currently en route to Ardenmere for first-wave settlement. They arrive in 11 days. The room fell silent again. Rael watched the color drain from Goss's scaled face. Mivan sat down heavily. Even Asin, armored and unreadable, closed his eyes for a moment. Can they be rerouted? Someone asked. Not in time, Asin said. They are on a fuel-committed trajectory. They land here or they drift. 12,000 people, coming to a planet that would eat itself alive beneath their feet. Danny let the silence hold for a moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, not cold, not commanding, just steady, the way a heartbeat is steady. The hollow is one organism, one connected network. Every tunnel, every chamber, every feeding route leads back to a central nerve cluster buried deep in the crust. Destroy the cluster, and the entire organism dies. Every branch, every node, all of it. How deep is this cluster? Asin asked. Approximately 4 kilometers beneath the surface, based on the density pattern in my scans. For kilometers through toxic, unstable, collapsing tunnels filled with a hostile organism, Asin said. No Union species can survive those conditions. Danny looked at him. That gentle face, that soft expression. But behind her eyes, something was burning. Something ancient and patient and absolutely unbreakable. No Union species, she agreed. But I am not from a Union world, Commander. I am from Earth. Asin stared at her. The entire room stared at her. Rael felt his bioluminescent patches flicker in the way they did when his body sensed something dangerous nearby. Danny reached for the comm panel on the wall. She entered a private frequency. The channel opened with a soft click. She spoke 4 words. Ren, I need you. A pause. Then a voice came back. Male. Rough. Familiar in the way it carried the same calm underneath. Send me the coordinates. Danny closed the channel. She turned to face Asin and the room full of frightened officers from a dozen different species. I know how to kill it, she said, but you're not going to like what it requires. Nobody spoke. The ship hummed around them. Somewhere far below, on the surface of a beautiful, doomed planet, the ground trembled again. Rael looked at Danny. She was not smiling, but she was not afraid either. She was something else entirely. Something the file in his terminal had described in dry, clinical language, but had completely failed to capture. She was a human with something to protect. The shuttle that arrived 2 days later did not look like a rescue craft. It was small, battered, scorched along its belly from too many rough atmospheric entries. It docked with the Pale Corridor without requesting permission, and before the airlock had fully pressurized, the inner door was already cycling open. The man who stepped through was shorter than Danny by a full head. He had the same brown skin, the same dark hair, but where hers was soft and loose, his was cropped close to the skull. His hands were scarred across every knuckle. His eyes carried the kind of sharpness that made Goss, a Draith twice his size, take a step backward without thinking. Then Danny came around the corner of the corridor, and everything about the man changed. His shoulders dropped. His jaw loosened. He opened his arms, and Danny walked into them. He lifted her off the ground and held her there for 3 full seconds. When he set her down, he was grinning. You look tired, he said. You look terrible, she said. I know. Let's go save a planet. His name was Ren Herrera, Combattant de Rescue Opérative. Certified for deep environment extraction, hazardous atmosphere survival, and subterranean navigation. Rael read his file later and found that it was 3 times longer than Danny's and had entire sections blacked out by military classification. The parts he could read were enough. Ren had pulled survivors from a collapsing mining station on a gas giant moon. He had spent 41 hours in a volcanic cave system on a world with no breathable air, carrying an injured crew member on his back for the last 12. He once swam through 400 meters of flooded tunnel in complete darkness to reach a trapped research team that he was, by every metric the Union used, one of the most dangerous humans alive. And he greeted Rail with a handshake and the words, "My sister says you are good people. That is enough for me." The briefing happened fast. Danny had spent the last 2 days refining her scans and mapping the tunnel network in detail. She projected a three-dimensional model in the command hall. The crew watched in grim silence as the image rotated slowly, showing the web of organic tunnels spreading beneath Ardenmir's northern continent like a disease through living tissue. "The nerve cluster is here," Danny said, pointing to a dense mass deep in the center of the network. 4 kilometers below the entry point I have identified on the surface. The tunnels leading down are wide enough for a person to move through, but they are unstable. The air inside is thick with spores that are toxic to every Union species we have tested. But not to humans, Ren said. It was not a question. Not immediately, Danny said. We will have roughly 6 hours of exposure before the spores begin to affect our lung tissue. The descent and return trip needs to happen inside that window. And the organism itself? Austin asked. Will it resist? Yes, Danny said. The hollow has defensive organisms. Eyeless, worm-like creatures that respond to vibration and heat. They will come for us. Ren leaned back in his chair. How big? The largest specimens on record were about 2 meters long. And how many? Unknown. Potentially hundreds. The room was silent. Rail looked around at the faces of the crew. The Draith officers were rigid with tension. The Pelori engineers looked sick. Even Miven, who had remained calm through most of the crisis, was gripping the edge of the table with white fingers. Ren looked at Danny. What are we carrying down? Thermal charges, she said. Enough to destroy the nerve cluster. I will navigate. You handle defense. We plant the charges, set the timers, and climb back out. How long on the timers? 20 minutes. Ren smiled. It was not the same smile as Danny's. Hers was warm and gentle. His was the kind of smile that came from a man who had already made peace with what he was about to do. I have done worse on a Tuesday, he said. Nobody laughed. But something shifted in the room. Rail felt it. A change in the air. These two humans, one soft and one hard, were not asking for permission. They were not begging for help. They were telling a room full of frightened aliens that they were going to walk into a dying planet and kill the thing that was eating it. And they were going to do it with their hands and their lungs and their stubborn, impossible bodies. Asin gave his approval. There was nothing else to give. That evening, Rail found Danny in the equipment bay, checking her suit seals for the 3rd time. Ren was across the room, sharpening a short blade against a stone he had brought from his shuttle. The sound of metal on rock filled the silence between them. Danny, Rail said. She looked up. Are you afraid? She set down her helmet. She looked at him with those brown eyes, those predator eyes that had never once made him feel like prey. And she smiled. That same smile. The one that had greeted him on the first day with a container of nutrient paste. The one that had apologized to his supply crate. The one that made him forget what she was. Always, she said. That is what keeps us alive. She picked up her helmet and went back to work. Across the room, Ren's blade caught the light as it slid across the stone. Outside the viewport, Ardenmir turned slowly in the dark, green and blue and beautiful and dying. Tomorrow, 2 humans would go beneath its skin and try to save it. Rail sat down on a cargo crate and watched them prepare. He did not understand humans. He was not sure anyone ever would. But sitting there, watching a gentle woman and her scarred brother get ready to walk into the mouth of something that had killed 11 worlds, he understood one thing. He was glad they were on his side. The tunnel entrance was nothing more than a wound in the hillside. A crack in the rock where the grass had died and the soil had turned black and soft. It breathed, a slow, warm exhale of foul air that smelled like rotting iron and something alive. Danny stood at the edge. Ren stood beside her. Behind them, Rail operated a portable biosign monitoring station from the back of the shuttle, 50 meters uphill. Goss and Pelham held a security perimeter around the site. Nobody spoke. Danny sealed her helmet. Ren sealed his. They looked at each other through their visors. No words, just a nod. Then they stepped into the dark. The first 100 meters were narrow. The walls were slick with something organic, warm to the touch, pulsing faintly with a bioluminescent glow that cast everything in pale green. The floor was uneven, half stone and half something that gave slightly under their boots like muscle. Danny led. She moved with careful, deliberate steps, her scanner held in front of her, reading the tunnel structure as they descended. Ren followed 2 paces behind, blade in one hand, thermal cutter in the other, his head turning in slow sweeps. "Comms check," Rail said through the link. His voice was already breaking up with static. "Clear," Danny said. "Clear," Ren said. They went deeper. The tunnel widened. The air thickened. Danny's suit readings showed the temperature climbing steadily. 40 degrees. 45. 50. The spore count in the air rose with every step. On her visor display, a small timer counted down from 6 hours. Their exposure window at 500 meters. The first defensive creatures appeared. Rail saw them on the biosign monitor before the Herreras did. Small heat signatures, fast-moving, converging from side tunnels. "Contact ahead," he said. 6 signatures. "Coming fast." Ren stepped forward. The creatures came around a bend in the tunnel. They were pale, eyeless, segmented things, each about a meter long, with circular mouths filled with inward curving teeth. They moved by scent and vibration. They sensed the heat of 2 human bodies and surged forward. Ren met the first one with his blade. One clean stroke. The creature split and fell twitching. The second one lunged for his leg. He sidestepped, grabbed it behind the head, and slammed it against the tunnel wall with a sound like wet stone cracking. The remaining 4 came in a rush. Ren moved through them without stopping. He did not fight like the Draith, who used strength and armor. He did not fight like the Pelori, who kept distance and used range tools. He fought like water moving through a narrow channel. Efficient, relentless, wasting nothing. 12 seconds. 6 creatures. None left moving. "Clear," Ren said, breathing slightly harder. "Nothing more." They kept going. 1 kilometer. 2. The tunnels twisted, branched, collapsed in places. Danny navigated by scanner and by instinct, choosing paths that angled downward, avoiding dead ends, sometimes pressing her hand against the tunnel walls and pausing as if she could feel the organisms pulse through her gloves. Rail watched her heart rate on his monitor. Elevated but controlled, steady as a drum. 3 kilometers. The tunnels opened into a wider passage lined with thick veins of organic material that glowed in waves, like breathing. The air was so thick with spores that visibility dropped to a few meters. The temperature hit 60 degrees. Rail's instruments showed their suit cooling systems running at maximum. Then the second wave hit, dozens of creatures, pouring from every side tunnel at once. The Hollow had felt them. It knew they were coming. Ren fought. He placed himself between the swarm and Danny, and he fought with everything he had. His blade rose and fell. His boots found purchase on the slick ground. When a creature got past his guard and tore through his suit at the shoulder, he did not stop. He grunted once, switched his blade to his other hand, and kept killing. Danny did not run. She pulled a medical kit from her pack without breaking stride, sealed the tear in Ren's suit with bonding tape, injected a clotting agent into his shoulder, and kept moving. She did all of this in under 30 seconds, while walking, while reading her scanner, while calculating their remaining distance. Rail's hands were shaking on the monitor controls. Their oxygen was dropping. Ren's blood pressure was falling. The spore exposure timer showed 4 hours and 11 minutes remaining. They were not even at the bottom yet. "Danny," Rail said through the static. "His vitals are dropping." "I know," she said. Her voice was calm, impossibly calm. "We are close." At 3.8 kilometers, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Rail lost visual on his instruments. The biosign readings flooded with interference from the sheer mass of organic material surrounding them. But through the static, he heard Danny's voice, quiet and awed. "There it is, the nerve cluster. A pulsing, cathedral-sized mass of tissue suspended in the center of the chamber, connected to every tunnel, every vein, every feeding route on the continent. It glowed with deep, rhythmic light. It was alive in a way that filled the entire space with sound, a low vibration that Rail could feel through the ground, even on the surface. Danny set her pack down. She began pulling out the thermal charges. Ren stood at her back, blade raised, blood running down his arm, watching the darkness for movement. Timer set for 20 minutes, Danny said. Ren looked at the chamber. He looked at the tunnel they had come through. He looked at the distance. Then he looked at his sister. "We are not going to make it back up before these blow," he said. Danny stopped. She turned to face him. Dust on her visor. Blood on her gloves. For kilometers of hostile earth above them. She smiled. That same gentle, quiet, unbreakable smile. "Then we better move fast," she said, and armed the first charge. Rail felt the detonation before he heard it. A deep, rolling shudder that passed through the ground like a wave through water. The grass around the monitoring station rippled. Loose stones bounced and skittered down the hillside. Goss stumbled. Pelham dropped to one knee. Then came the sound. Not an explosion. A scream. Deep below the surface, the hollow screamed. Not with a voice. With vibration. With the death of a trillion connected nerve endings burning out one after another, continent-wide, like a fire sweeping through dry wood. The ground shook for nearly a full minute. Cracks appeared in the hillside. The tunnel entrance collapsed inward, swallowing itself in a cloud of dust and broken rock. Rail stared at his biosign monitor. 2 heartbeats. He could still see 2 heartbeats. Fast. Faint. But there. Then the signal died. The screen went dark. Static. Nothing. Rail did not move. He did not breathe. He stared at the blank display as if he could will it back to life through sheer focus. Around him, the crew moved in slow, stunned silence. Goss spoke into his comm, calling the pale corridor, reporting the detonation. Pelham began scanning the collapsed entrance with a structural analyzer. Miven, who had come down on the second shuttle to help, stood with her hands pressed to her mouth. Minutes passed. The ground settled. The screaming beneath the earth faded and then stopped. Across the continent, the tunnel network was dying. Rail could see it on the deep scan display. Section by section, the organic tissue was going dark. The veins stopped pulsing. The glow faded. Ardenmere was being freed, organ by organ, from the thing that had been devouring it. But the 2 people who had saved it were buried beneath 4 kilometers of collapsing earth. Commander Asen's voice came through the comm, quiet and heavy. "Prepare a memorial marker." Rail did not respond. He walked to the collapsed tunnel entrance and stood there. Dust still hung in the air. The rock was warm. He placed his hand against it and felt nothing. No pulse, no vibration. Just stone. He stood there for 9 minutes. He counted every one. Then he heard it. A sound. Faint, rhythmic, coming from beneath the rubble. Not a machine, not the hollow. Something else. Something deliberate, tapping. Rail dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the rock. The tapping was steady. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. A pattern. A human pattern. He had read about it in the cultural database once. An old signal from their world. It meant one thing: help. "They are alive," Rail said. His voice cracked. "They are alive. Dig now." Goss moved first. Then Pelham. Then Miven. They pulled rock by hand. They used cutting tools and pry bars and raw strength. Rail worked beside them, his thin sylvan arms straining against stones twice his weight, his bioluminescent patches blazing white with effort. 20 minutes. 30. The tapping grew louder. Closer than a voice. Muffled. Rough. Unmistakable. "Someone want to dig us out? My sister is getting impatient." Goss let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He tore at the rubble with his armored hands. The last barrier broke apart, and there they were. Ren came out first. He was covered head to toe in gray dust. His suit was shredded along one side. His left leg dragged behind him, clearly broken below the knee. Blood had dried in dark streaks across his face and neck. He was grinning like a man who had just won a bet against the universe. Danny came out behind him. Her suit was torn open at the arm. The limb hung at an angle that made Rail's stomach turn. Her visor was cracked. Dust coated every surface of her body. She moved slowly, carefully, Using her good hand to brace against the rock as she climbed free, she looked up at Rail. Dirt on her face, blood on her teeth, one arm broken. For kilometers of hostile tunnel behind her, a dead god beneath her feet, and she smiled, that same smile. Warm, gentle, quiet. The smile that had greeted him with nutrient paste on the first day. The smile that had apologized to a crate. The smile that made no sense on a creature born from the most violent world in the known galaxy. Rail understood it now. He understood all of it. Humans were not gentle despite being hunters. They were gentle because they were hunters. They had already won. Every predator, every disaster, every ice age and eruption and plague their savage world had thrown at them, they had beaten. They had climbed to the top of the most dangerous food chain in the galaxy and looked around and decided they were done fighting. They chose kindness. They chose softness. They chose smiling at cups of tea and apologizing to furniture. And when something threatened the people they had chosen to protect, they went back to what they were built for. Quietly, without hesitation, without complaint. They walked into the dark and they killed the thing that lived there, and then they climbed back out and smiled like it was just another day. The Union fleet arrived 3 weeks later. Ardmir was declared safe. The colony transports landed without incident. The official report was filed and classified. But Rail added a personal footnote that was later quoted in xenobiology textbooks across 42 systems. Do not be deceived by the human smile. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that they have already decided you are worth protecting. And there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a human who has decided to protect you. On the hull of the Pale Corridor, Danny sat watching the sunset over a living world, a cup of tea in her good hand, her brother beside her, arm in a sling, leg in a cast. Neither spoke. She smiled at the horizon, and the planet, alive and healing and free, turned slowly beneath them.